My topic today would be on combating counterfeit and piracy through intellectual property law in Sri Lanka. Right? Now, my objective of the study is this: that is to identify whether the current intellectual property law regime in Sri Lanka provides an effective mechanism for combating counterfeiting or piracy. Right? Before moving on to the other areas, first of all, we may have to identify now what is meant by this counterfeiting and piracy. Now, basically, this counterfeiting and piracy both generally refers to the same thing, making of an illegal copy. So it can be with regard to currency, it can be with regard to any product, but my focus in this particular study is with regard to counterfeiting and piracy of commercial products, that is products which are having a commercial value and which can be offered for sale. Now, when we look at the modern context, we find a lot of counterfeits and pirated products existing in the market today. For example, you find liquor, you find books, you find cigarettes, you find drugs, shoes, mobile phones, you name it, you can see those in the market itself. A fundamental feature of these counterfeits and pirated goods is that it's difficult for you to make a distinction as to what is the genuine one and what is the pirated one or the counterfeit. Now, that will be specially existing in the case of liquor. For example, when you consume it, you won't be able to make head or tails out of that, right? So, why this counterfeiting and piracy has become an important topic of the day is because of these factors. Now, if you would see the statistics, now they say the trade in counterfeit and pirate products in the world is about US $450 billion per annum. Right? Then you see there is an increase of the share of counterfeit and pirated goods in world trade that has increased from 1.85 in 2002 to 1.95 in 2007. So, you have to calculate this in terms of US billions. So, when you calculate it, that would be a huge amount, right? Then you see the losses faced by especially the developing countries like US is about US $600 billion a year. Now, this is a chart which gives the value of seized counterfeit goods in 2010. So, you can figure out now what are the goods that are being mostly pirated or counterfeited. Now, why I talk about this counterfeiting and piracy is basically because that has certain significant impacts on the national economy of a country as well as the national security of a country. Why? Because as they say, that erodes the market for genuine goods, defraud consumers and creates unfair competition. So, ultimately that would be a hurdle or an obstacle for economic development of a country. On the other hand, that's a major issue that the countries face because of terrorism. Because this counterfeiting and piracy today has become a major source of funding terrorist activities. And organizations which are held by involved by criminals around the world. Now, for example, the research has established that even Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah and Irish Republican Army, those organizations rely on counterfeiting and pirating of goods to generate income for their survival, or else in other words to raise funds. So if you can combat the problem of counterfeiting and piracy, that means that would be a mechanism by which you can combat terrorism. Then, now what is the relationship which intellectual property has with this counterfeiting and piracy? Now when we talk about intellectual property, now intellectual property law or the concept of intellectual property covers a spectrum of areas. Now that would include copyright, related right, patents, industrial designs, trademarks, geographical indications, integrated circuits, unfair competition, so on and so forth. Now, the relationship between this intellectual property concept and counterfeiting and piracy is that now with regard to these commercial goods, almost all the time you find those come under the purview of intellectual property. For example, when you take a book, that will receive the protection of the copyright law, right? For example, if you take a drug, most of the time that would receive the protection of patent law. For example, if you take trademarks or something, now we were talking about liquor and something. For example, now there are trademarks of say Johnny Walker or something, you get the trademark. So that protection is there. Then geographical indications, champagne, unfair competition, that is any act or practice contrary to trade. So therefore, you find these intellectual property rights are there in commercial goods. So intellectual property law can be used as a mechanism to stop counterfeiting and piracy. For example, if a book is pirated or counterfeited, then that would definitely violate the copyright law or the copyright of the author of that book or the owner of that book. So in that sense, you can curb piracy or counterfeiting by using these intellectual property rights. Then when we talk about these intellectual property rights, you find now in the international arena, the TRIPS or what we call the Agreement on Trade Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. Now that particular agreement is considered as the most comprehensive and most significant development at the international level, right? So that is because of the reasons which I have enumerated here. It recognizes the need for a multilateral framework dealing with international trade in counterfeit goods. That is the most striking effort to strengthen and protect intellectual property rights. Most comprehensive multilateral agreement covers all areas of intellectual property rights, lays down minimum standards of protection of intellectual property rights, contain detailed provisions on enforcement. So one of the main objectives of bringing this particular TRIPS agreement was to curb piracy and counterfeiting. Now why this TRIPS agreement becomes important to us is that our entire corpus of law on intellectual property is contained in the Intellectual Property Rights Act number 36 of 2003. Now that is a complete, that has been enacted in complete compliance with the TRIPS agreement. You find the same provisions which are contained in the TRIPS agreement in the Intellectual Property Rights Act of Sri Lanka. And sometimes you can see our law has gone far beyond the TRIPS agreement. For example, if you take copyright, now here the protection is extended to 70 years, but under the